Welcome to the Rig Doctor podcast, where I'm giving out remedies to soothe your ailing tone and fix your sick pedal boards. I'm your host, Mason Marangella, aka the Rig Doctor. I've been building rigs for over a decade for many of the industry's top pros, and now I'm giving away all my secrets to DIYers just like you. I'm giving away all of my tips, tricks, resources, and easy hacks that I've learned over the years so you can build a pedal board just like a pro. If you want to support this podcast, you can do it in a bunch of different ways. Easiest way is to write us a review on iTunes, or you could follow us on social media, places like Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. You can also support us financially by purchasing one of my products, Vertex Effects, from any of our authorized dealers all around the world. Or you could become a member of our Patreon. We have several Patreon memberships as low as $4.99 a month that give you exclusive access to private live streams, Q&As, exclusive deals and discounts on Vertex products, as well as early access to new product releases. Also, you can get personalized one-on-one phone and email conversations with me, the Rig Doctor, to coach you through your next rig build. This could be as in-depth as troubleshooting a problem on your pedal board in real time with me, or some emails advising you on next steps, on certain pieces of gear to buy, and good stuff just like that. I don't want money, though, to be the reason that you can't engage with the Patreon side. So if you don't have the means to do it at this particular time, that's no problem. We actually offer a free version of our standard account at no charge if means are an issue. That means if you just send us an email requesting a free account, we grant 100% of those accounts, no charge whatsoever. We just trust that once things have changed for you and you can afford the $4.99 a month, you let us know. But until then, your account remains free. I also want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Blue Microphones. Kevin Walt at Blue Mics is just the man. He gave us everything. We have Yeti mics, we have boom arms, we have pop filters, we have everything that a podcaster would need, and we supremely appreciate that. Thank you to Blue Microphones. In today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with session guitar ace, Michael Thompson. If you were alive at all in the 90's or 2000's, you've heard Michael Thompson many, many times and maybe didn't even know it. He played on all the hits from David Foster to Babyface and more, and was just prolific. I mean, anything that he touched literally turned to gold. I think there was a part in the 90's where there was an entire decade of the Hot 100 where he was on the top 10 for like every single year except for one. He was so prolific in the things that he did. He has a signature tone, whether you're talking about Celine Dion, big ballad chords, or whether you're talking about funky stuff with Babyface and Tony Braxton. He did it all. Really amazing player. I had so much fun doing this interview with him. I can't wait. Here he is, Michael Thompson. Well, let's start back at sort of like the first sort of pivotal moment. Do you feel like there was one particular? Hold on, just a sec.
Wait, you cut out.
How's that? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, good. Yeah, I think that for some reason I bumped my phantom power.
Oh,
now we're back. So was there one particular session that you felt like cemented? Or kind of you felt like was the pivotal sort of turning point where you really started getting to be the first call guy? Was there like a certain point where that you felt like that happened, or was it like a cumulative thing, or kind of how do you feel like, what do you feel like was the demarcation for you?
well, you can almost trace it to. It took so long to kind of work my way up to getting those first big time calls that, like, I tell people that it took the better part of the 80's for me to quote unquote break in.
Right.
Which isn't to say I was doing nothing and then all of a sudden I was doing everything. Every year got better, and every year I made more connections. And I would get sessions with the Cats, the busy studio guys every now and then.
Yeah.
So it's not like I hadn't worked with them and stuff, but as far as me working my way up to playing on records, for big artists with a couple of big producers, that almost seems like there was the first big one was that I didn't know was going to be big was this Gloria Stefan thing where I got called at the last minute. This guy Humberto Gatica was mixing the song, and I didn't find out till kind of recently there were already guitars on it that he didn't dig, that she had done with her guys and stuff. And because I came in and it was a pretty sparse track, and he said, "Hey, buddy, I want like a U2-y thing, right? So I started doing like a or whatever that part is, just a little thing, but it worked, and that was what he wanted. But he was sitting there mixing the song, and a couple of people from her camp were there and stuff, and so that was a number one record, and I believe that was the first one I played on. But it was kind of fluky. I got called at 9 a.m.
Right.
Can you get in here right away? I'd never worked with Hum before, and we ended up working together for 25 years and stuff. But
nice.
The next one was another sort of last-minute, fluky-ish kind of thing. This woman from New York named Susan Hamilton, who was a really big jingle person in New York, moved to L.A. and wanted to get into record producing and stuff. And she had a deal with Michael Bolton to do like one song per hour, because she was the one that hired him to like sing on these McDonald's commercials and stuff. Before he became big, he sang on a couple of really big jingles.
Okay.
And so she had like a pact with him that she would get to produce. I think she did like Georgia on My Mind on the album before it, or anyway, for this record, she was doing, When a Man Loves a Woman.
Right.
And so she was new out here, and someone had recommended me, and she was kind of like weird over the phone. Another person, I ended up working with her for years and stuff, but when she first called me up, she was like wanting me to sell myself over the phone and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, When a Man Loves a Woman, everyone knows that song. And stuff.
Right.
So I go into the session, and Jeff Porcaro was on drums, which was fantastic. I had done one thing with him before that, and he was just such a beautiful cat. I mean, he treated me from the first time we worked together like I was like an important guy, like one of the Cats, like him and Luke and all those guys. And that meant a lot to me. And I remember at that session before we got going, I was talking to Jeff, and I said, "Man, what's up with this Susan Hamilton chick?" I said, she was like grilling me and stuff. He said, "Yeah, she did the same thing to me." And I'm like, really? To Jeff Porcaro? She, because she knew who the Cats were and stuff. But that made me feel better about like, man, even Jeff kind of got a little shit and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, we're doing the tune, and I was just thinking about this the other day, because I would try, until I got like a rig going, I would try different things. I had like a hodgepodge of stuff, but what I had on that song was that, remember the Alan Holdsworth Rocktron?
Oh, yeah.
Like you plugged your speaker into it?
Yeah.
It was like a early speaker emulator kind of thing. And it had some good things about it. I remember it was kind of a little finicky with like the level that it saw and stuff like that. But anyway, for that session, I had a Marshall into that. Marshall and clean, like a Plexi or something, right?
Right.
With no effects, because it was, and I had that, that opening thing that just worked. And I wasn't even sure. I remember in the tune, I did like something like that, which wasn't even the right part. Like the original was like a high thing like that,
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool because I didn't have the exact part off the record and stuff.
Right,
and so Michael dug it, and his guitar players ever since have had to learn that that part verbatim.
Yeah.
Which,
was that the Hitmaker Strat there that you were using on
it
it?
was. Into that Marshall, into the Holdsworth thing, through like some kind of little rack I had at that time. I remember my big piece of gear was the 2290.
Oh, nice.
And I think about that now, and I guess it's still people are looking for those and stuff. But,
oh yeah.
But like as someone told me, it's like it's just a mono delay.
Yeah.
But that was I remember it was expensive. It was like $1,800, and I had to save up for it. But it gave me the sense of like I was starting to have like a little rig built around it,
Yeah.
But it had that mono sort of not ping pong, but it was just a mono delay that I would set to go back and forth.
Yeah.
And it had modulation on it, but I remember thinking it was going to get me like the edge kind of modulation. But even with the 2290 modulation on full, it was still kind of a light chorusing and wasn't as, not that what I was after was that extreme of a detuning thing, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And I didn't get that until the H3000 and the famous micro pitch shift patch,
And so were you using, so at that time with because that's a really classic, to me, that's sort of like a really fat, organic Strat tone that you hear in the opening of that song.
Yeah.
And
so on that, on that Michael Bolton song, that was just, I think it was just dry with nothing on it. I don't think I had a choice of like, I've always been kind of shy on printing reverbs and stuff anyway, but I didn't even have any delay or anything on it. And I probably had the 2290, but maybe I did. That was like 1990. No, I had it, but anyway, it was that kept me searching for that edge, detune thing, and I felt like I found it with the, which I guess maybe shortly after that I got the 3000 because you've had it. That was pretty early on.
Yeah. What was the pickups that were in your Strat at that time?
Actually, the ones in it for a long time, for most of the 80s until it lay fallow for a couple of years, and then I recharged it with the current setup, which is Fralin vintage. I'm not sure exactly. 50s vintage, just regular singles that Fralin makes. And Jim Kaufman makes this booster that for some reason, like you put it in your guitar, and I never actually use the boost. It's on 0, but it's on all the time.
Right.
That preamp adds a glassy sheen to the sound that if you take it away, there goes your glass.
Right.
So it was a combination of a good sounding block of wood that actually sounded good with a couple of different things. Well, it's been the Fralins, and so to your question, it was Seymour Classic Stacks.
Oh, really?
Seymour Duncan Classic Stacks with a Bartolini booster.
Wow.
That also added a shimmer to it, somewhere between like having the Bartolini for all those years and when I revamped this guitar, I had gotten hip to the Kaufman booster, right? So that's what I had put in this instead of trying to find that same Bartolini booster and stuff. But it was one of those things that just kind of came together, the classic stacks with the booster, and because it was Stratty enough sounding, even though they were stacks, and it just worked.
Yeah, somebody chimed in the chat. There was the Rocktron Juice Extractor. The Juice Extractor.
That was it, man.
Thanks to Nick Johnson for chiming that one in.
And I think there were some problems with it. I think maybe they got sued by someone. I'm not sure. And like I said, it was finicky, like to the point of like your amp could catch on fire or something like that. But it had EQ on it. That's what I liked about it. And if you went in like with a clean sound and you weren't like taxing a 100-watt Marshall on 10 or something, it was kind of cool. I've messed around with a lot of those. Those things.
Yeah, I want to get to at the end here. I want to get to some of MT's picks for favorite favorite devices and pedals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But okay, so that was kind of like the 90s, early 90s.
So that session was so I'd had that Gloria, that tune, that was number one, and then that When a Man Loves a Woman, I think surprised everyone. Like, Michael wasn't planning on releasing that as a single, but the radio people, I remember him telling me about this. It's like, I never second guess radio. And like they started playing it and stuff. And so I had another, and that was like a really big number one song, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember
And so I was
my
sort
mom always
of on
had
my
it.
way a little bit after, a decade of like doing every demo and this and that and just like wanting so bad to get called to, play on records because of me being me and not because they couldn't get Landau or Huff or something. But the one that really, the thing that sealed my future with David Foster, who was, for lack of any other, to be totally honest, I mean, he was the one that put me on the map and kept me there for a long time. And it wasn't because he liked hanging out with me or I got, brought groovy chicken salad sandwiches to the session or something. It's like I delivered, and it's funny because I thought if I ever worked with David Foster, like he would have every note written out for me or something, but it couldn't have been more opposite. It was like, okay, what do you got? And that's what it's all about. It's like, what are you bringing to it? So that biggie, because I'd worked with him like 1 year prior to this first session with Celine was The Power of Love. And I had done like a quickie last minute thing where someone had recommended me. And so I had made that initial connection, but it wasn't like, wow, I got to really show him what I did. And I mean, he liked what I did. It was like a favor for Paul Anka kind of demo thing. And a year went by. But then I got a call. That same guy, Humberto, was the engineer. And I had worked with him. But I got there, and Celine was there with her husband. And they put this track up, The Power of Love. And it was really a good one for me because I got to do like 4 or 5 guitar parts. And I even played like doubled the bass with this baritone I had. I remember David saying like the synth didn't have enough point to it, the synth bass. And so I went through the tune and I guess I can say I played bass on that song too. I doubled the bass part and it gave it kind of a cool sound, the Barry playing the same thing. But I got to do the clean thing, and Humberto's a really incredible engineer and stuff. And he was like, I remember we were working with the clean sound, and I might have started out by going through like my amps and stuff, but for that sound, a lot of the time direct was more the thing. Okay. And so he's like, hey buddy, I want it even cleaner or something, and so we went direct through my rig, with the H3000 and whatever I had going at that point. But and that gave it that like the sound I love too, which I've done a lot of direct, and to this day I still, when you want that sound, I can get it with speakers, but if you want the really shimmery, clean Strat thing, to me it's kind of got to be direct. Yeah. But then you got to like make it so it doesn't sound too direct. But anyway, so we did that, and then we did the famous with the Floyd Rose into the last verse or whatever, and Celine just loved that. Her and her husband, they called that the slide. We'd call it like a swoop or something. But so the other thing is, at the end of that session, Humberto took like 20 minutes and made a mix, and a lot of the time at the end of the session, someone will make a rough mix, but usually the problem is that there aren't the keeper vocals yet. But Celine had done her keeper vocals, so it had like the killer, what you ended up hearing as the record was already there. So he had that, and he took like 20 minutes, and the guitars were up in the mix. And so he made Celine a DAT that they took away from that session of that mix he made with, everyone was jazzed, the guitars were up. And what usually happens is they make that mix and then other people get involved or other people make comments and blah, blah, blah. Guitars get pulled down. They add more shit. And that groovy mix that everyone was like getting off on at the guitar overdub session is history, right?
Yeah.
But that particular case was him making that DAT for them. And then David, I didn't know this for a while afterwards, but he went ahead and put like bells and strings and shit on it that they didn't dig at all. They dug this sort of, it's not rock and roll at all, but they liked the guitar sort of up and stuff. And so that DAT was, I guess at one point they lost it or couldn't find it and they were in a panic because that was the mix, blah, blah, blah. And that's a story she's told, that then they magically found it or whatever. But that ended up being the record, that mix that he made that day,
Nice. And that was, again, the Hitmaker Strat there?
Yeah, and a couple other. I would do cranked stuff, like when it came time to do the power chords and the little, there's a couple of little lines and that thing. I had a guitar that a friend of mine made that had EMG, humbuckers and a Floyd on it. So I would pick up that guitar to do my crank stuff.
Right. And was the next... Sorry,
what's that?
Go ahead. No, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say that song was the beginning with David Foster, but I remember, and then then his new sort of renaissance of because he had the early '80s hits and the Chicago stuff and Giro and a bunch of stuff. And then I never realized it, but he got cold for a few years and couldn't get arrested like in the later 80s. And that's when I met him at the end of that like 3-year period where he just wasn't getting, I don't know whether he wasn't being offered hits or whatever. But that Celine thing, that Power of Love thing, kicked his career back into gear. And of course, it started mine with him. And it seemed like every other week through the 90s, there'd be another song that would become a hit. A lot of them were Diane Warren songs. And it was just a good combo, a Diane Warren song with David producing. And those songs, the band was me and him on a synclav. There was an English guy named Simon Franklin that was over here for the 90s, and then he moved back to England. But he had a synclav, and he was really good on it and really quick on it because David likes to work like that. And literally the two of them would put the track together, like say on a Tuesday, and Wednesday I would come in and put the guitar on it. Then he would do the vocals, and bam, that it was pretty done. And then sometimes he would have the string arranger Bill Ross do strings if that's what it involved and stuff. But the actual track would go down like that. And so, no bass player, no drummer, but that guy was really good at putting tracks together and with kind of like more of an earthy sound than a lot of programmer kind of guys and stuff. And that was the sound of those records, that whole string of 90s hits.
So all the
love them or hate them.
So like on the Robert Redford movie, what's the Celine Dion, the kind of the thematic song, Because You Love Me.
Yeah.
Same format there.
Song. What's that?
Same format on that record.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess after Power of Love, that was the next one.
Yeah.
And that was a Celine tune. I mean, a Diane Warren song. And and it was just, and then it was like All by Myself. And then that other one that one that the Japanese group, there was this Japanese group called, wasn't Cadillac, but it was some weird name like that. Yeah. And it was going to be for Japan only.
Yeah.
Now I'm spacing on the name, but anyway, that became
the one To Love You More. To
Love You More, yeah. And it had the great violin on it and stuff. And that just became a worldwide hit. But it originally was just supposed to be for Japan and stuff. But anyway, and then there was just like a lot of other artists that I mean, like on my hit reel that has all those songs. I was just mostly, I wanted to put the most well known. But there was a bunch of other songs with David and during that period and stuff. For like so many different artists, but it was kind of a regular thing, like every other week it felt like,
Yeah.
And then I got to hear myself on the radio. That was the really cool thing because that's a lot of our dream from when you're a kid, and I especially was enamored with the idea of playing on a song that like you could hear the guitar part on the radio, And over the years that became harder and harder to do because songs weren't,
right.
I mean, those great songs in the 60s and stuff all had like a guitar signature thing. So it was harder in the age of synths and drum machines and stuff to create parts where you could hear the guitar. So any of those tunes. And with David it was pretty cool because you knew he wasn't gonna, his whole thing was at the end of the session, he wanted to push up your two left and right faders. Even if I punched in, a whole bunch of times, picked up this baritone and did the bridge with that, picked up this other guitar and played like 3 notes in the middle of the thing. At the end of the session, he wanted to have that all on 2 tracks. Of course, on a bunch of tunes, we had other tracks for, like a baritone and acoustics and stuff, but he would, and I really dug that. That was one of the things I sort of saw how he was working, and then you see how other people would work where they just wanted like tons of choices, which to this day, I'm not into that. I'm into coming up with the part, and I may layer a bunch of parts, but they're the part that I feel belong on the record.
Yeah.
Some other people, I remember doing this Kenny Loggins record where he wanted to keep everything, and he second guessed stuff, and I mean amazing artists and stuff, and we got on fine in the studio, but that whole like, and then like they're mixing the song and there's like 199 tracks of things and was it this pass or that pass and he'd want to like have a backup. It's like I love that part, but let's get another one doing that, and that. I'm not into that, but David wasn't into that. He was.
Did you do those out in Santa Barbara?
I remember, like sometimes he would. I would come in a lot of the time, and I would have been like at home in my studio messing around with a new pedal or a new sound or something, right? And as I'm getting my sound together in his studio, I would play that thing. I mean, it might be a filter into a delay or something like that, but I had like a cool little thing, and sometimes he'd go, that's great. We got to figure out how to use that on this song, And so like in the intro of a Josh Groban song or something, you might hear this thing. And that was something I was messing around with. Or other times he'd go, that's really cool, but I'd never use it on this record. I mean, he'd be like straight up.
Yeah.
And the way it would go would be I'd play one pass through the tune once I got my sound up. And he'd write these really like a doctor's writing chart, like, total scribble. And so I'm there and I'm like trying to, get my thing together and trying to learn a song, right, as they're running the track. And a lot of times he would hear like one thing I did that he liked, like or something that I did in the middle of the song. And he would leave that and we would punch our way around that one lick. Wow. But he'd hear like one thing he liked and that would sort of point me in a direction. And then we'd start at the top and I'd do a little sprinkling in the intro. And then it was a law. I could never play in the first verse ever, which I didn't dig that rule because, and once I started working with Mutt Lange on that thing, his thing's all about, there may be 4 guitar parts on the first verse, but they all work like amazingly together. But David's thing was, it's usually going to be just the piano on the first verse or something, because he was into building a tune, which is another thing I feel like by osmosis of sitting next to him working on these songs, I learned a bit about producing and arranging how a track should go. So he, I mean, that's kind of like Dynamics 101, where you start and you build up. But the B section, the first B section is usually the first place I would enter. Whether it was a volume swell or a little thingy, that would be, a lot of the time, that would be the first time you'd hear me, other than the intro.
Yeah.
Then it was the chorus, and it was like, okay, I'd play the chorus until I came up with a part, and he'd hear something I did and go, cool, what if you did that? But on the other side, we would try something like, and we're fans of the same stuff, like what Al McKay with Earth, Wind and Fire would do or something like that. And so, it was a fun kind of always a fun sort of learning experience that might have withered other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we're just talking about David Foster here, but he would have this cutting sense of humor, right? That, like, to give you an idea, and he'd say shit, you flub up something, he said, okay, now try it without the boxing gloves on, but one famous time I've told about was I came in and it was a Diane Warren song, but on first listen, well, I did my usual playing along with one pass, right? And it wasn't like one of her A tunes to me. It sounded like a B tune, right? So after I finished just playing it down once, I said, "Do you think this song's a hit?" And he said, "Not unless you start playing better than that." But you have to like just withstand that and keep going ahead, because he's not saying it. I mean, it could be construed as kind of like a mean vibe, but that was his thing. I never once left without him going, "Man, you played your ass off." And that's why I got called back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, it wasn't for the hang.
What was it like working with Babyface? Because he was kind of one of the other producers that you were working with that had a huge volume of work.
As far as his, demeanor and stuff, couldn't be more opposite from David, but equally as unbelievably great. David and Babyface were the biggest things in the 90s. And I remember, like, for a few years there, David mostly had studios at his house in Malibu, a couple of different houses. But for a while there, he was working at this place called the Record Plant, and Babyface was down the hall working on this Waiting to Exhale soundtrack.
Yeah, which you were all over.
It's such a great sound. I mean, it blows my mind that he wrote all those tunes.
Oh my gosh.
And so he was there for like a few months while his studio, Brandon's Way, was being built. Like, he basically had them build him like his own record plant, And so he was camped out there, and I remember working with David in like the first studio on the right when you go in, and Nathan East stopped in to our session to say hi, and he said, I said, who are you working with? And he said, "I'm working with Babyface down the hall." And I was like so jealous. It was like, damn, even though I was working with David Foster, it was like, I wanted to work with Babyface, because I loved his records but he had a very, you find with a lot of these people, they have a very like closed sort of group of people that they deal with, and they're only aware of who they're aware of, and Kenny had his, well, he's a guitar player. He was playing on a lot of it, but he wasn't like using the Cats on guitar or anything at all,
Right.
And I mean, I credit him with like single-handedly bringing the acoustic guitar back into pop music when he did.
When Will I See You Again? Yeah.
I mean, just the simplest thing, but it was like it caught everyone's imagination,
Right.
And so anyway, so Nathan, and that was, I believe that was also for Waiting to Exhale. He was down the hall. So the way this studio was set up, they put my speakers I mean, it was soundproof, but like you could walk down the hall and hear my speakers really well, like, you know, through the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kenny's like walking by this I mean, we were in there for, you know, a while. I think we were working on actually Celine's album. And so he's hearing me, and I was friends with, or I had worked with his engineer, this guy named Brad Gilderman, quite a bit with this other guy, Ronnie Foster. We had worked together a lot, but Brad was Babyface's engineer, and so Kenny like asked Brad if he like, he didn't even personally come down the hall and like introduce himself and say, "Hey man, do you want to play on a session?" He sent Brad down, and he came in. He said, "Hey, Kenny wants to know if you want to come in and play on a tune, right?" And so, of course, I did, and I was like thrilled. And the first tune they put up was this song called "Count on Me," this Whitney Houston tune.
Yeah.
To my horror, it was like full, and it didn't need me, and it already sounded great when I walked in. And that happened to me a couple of times. One other time I'll tell you about in a bit, but which is like, you're faced with this, okay, I want to show them what I can do.
Right.
My groovy stuff that I can do, but this song is not calling for that, right? So I just feel my way around. I'm doing, some volume swells, and then maybe a little, a little slidey thing or whatever. Yeah. And Kenny's like really shy and was standing over by the door to the studio and not saying anything, man, just listening. And and so you're of course, on a first time working with someone, you're really wondering, are they digging this, or like, do I suck or what?
Yeah.
It's like, so he, I see him nodding a little bit, and then so I played on that tune, and when I hear it now, it's nice. It wasn't some big part that it really needed or anything, but it was my sound that was in there and stuff. And so after, he was like, man, are you available to come in and play on, the next thing? And it's like, yeah, okay, what about Thursday or whatever? And and I ended up playing on like 7 songs for that record. Yeah. And that started like I think it was about 5 years of working with him, and playing and doing his DVD, going to New York and doing the live in New York, which was such a good
so many good songs on that.
To this day, a lot of people dig that DVD just because it was it just sounds great. But you know what, to get that, we rehearsed every day for 30 days.
Wow.
And the band was, Ricky Lawson,
Nathan East,
and it was just so good. But can you imagine playing? We had the set down in like a few days, right? The whole rest of the 30 days was running the set like 3 times in its entirety every day.
Yeah.
And because Kenny, like a lot of artists, they like to over-rehearse. Not over-rehearse. He especially wasn't super confident as a performer and stuff, and so you couldn't run it enough for him.
Right.
But what ends up happening is, like, you've been on the road for 6 months or something. It's really tight, and it's really, so because I remember the place that we played in New York City looked really cool, like it was for MTV, but
right.
It was a really cool venue, but really echoey and really not a tight sound at all. I mean, everything was close mic, so they ended up doing a great mix, but we had rehearsed it so much that it didn't throw you off, the fact that it was pretty ambient.
And that was, you were using the Grosh Strat on that one, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah, and the car amp was in the back there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The 6V.
And like a rack that had my stuff in it. Yeah. And I forget how I was going, and from the amp probably into like a hot plate or something like that. That was my rig.
Did Kenny do all the MD stuff for that, or did somebody else do it?
Did who?
Did Kenny do the musical direction?
No, he had a guy who was his childhood idol, this guy named Bo Watson, who was in a band called wasn't Atlantic Star. It was Midnight Star. And Kenny used to go see him, and Bo was like a fantastic, phenomenal. Because Kenny, he was from Cleveland, and so like he'd go to the club and see these guys, and so he idolized this guy. So years later, Bo became his MD.
Man, because those arrangements are so good.
Cat, one of those sort of church cats that could just
Oh yeah, well I mean you can tell because there's a super church arrangement of Change the World where it goes into that whole like breakdown at the end, and then also the transitions like into the Boys to Men stuff that was on that.
Yes.
To End of the Road.
Talk about a song evolving.
Yeah.
The other thing about rehearsing it for 30 days was, and you had all these great musicians and stuff, they started throwing in like 2/5s.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, man, these songs had like so many extra hits. I mean, they were cool.
Yeah.
But they were like
and key modulations because it would modulate up in the key like on Change the World. Yeah, like a gospel.
And so that just kept getting added on, and and they were working on a show, so there was stuff being worked into it, and Kenny was actually rehearsing the stuff he was going to say, but it came off great.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and if you haven't heard that live in New York, I think it was even dubbed as an unplugged, wasn't it? Even though it was plugged.
It was.
Yeah, but it was great.
Then they went, wait a second, no one was unplugged, and so they called it like at the night at the club or something like that, or something like that. But I remember Nathan played an acoustic.
He played like a Yamaha acoustic bass on something.
Yeah, to give it the look of unplugged. And we were sitting down.
Right.
So that sort of had that vibe, but we should have just,
Yeah,
but unplugged was the big
that's
thing.
Incredible,
so
though.
That's what we pretended it was.
Yeah, and then also I guess you did some of the Madonna stuff too through Babyface too, right?
No. I only played on one Madonna song, and she was a pain in the ass. It was one of those experiences of like
that was Live to Tell.
No, it was called You'll See.
Oh yeah.
It was like a minor hit, or it was a hit,
I remember that. Did you play the acoustic on that too, or was that Dean Parks?
No, Dean Parks played the acoustic on it.
He was doing all those like Tony Braxton kind of like Spanishy, style.
Yeah, I mean, the little sort of story on that session was I came in, and a lot of the time, a lot of people don't realize that the artist isn't there.
Right.
And a lot of the time the artist wasn't there for a lot of these songs, but the ones, and I can remember them all because it had it makes an impact when, oh wow, Phil Collins is actually here, before the session even started and stuff. And there was a number of people that I did get to work with them there when I was doing the track, and that was always cool. But in her case, she was there because it was at her studio. She had a studio called Brooklyn, and it was kind of a tight fit, especially with my rig, which was big. And there was the board, and then there was this couch, but it wasn't very far back. And she was sitting on the couch, and all my stuff was there. And so I get in there because I think they had been working on something on the tune right before I got there, and so I didn't even have that warming up period that I realized after that session is like so important because, don't have someone chiming in their ideas while you're trying to get your sound. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's what happened with that session. It's like, I haven't even had a chance to go through the tune, and she's sitting literally like on this couch that was right behind me, and I could hear her right in my ear. And fucking everything I played was like, oh no, don't play there. Oh, I like that. No, don't. And I'm hearing that as I'm playing this for the first time. Talk about like groove kill. But I did walk out of there saying to myself, no one can say she doesn't have something to do with every note that goes down on her records. I mean, she's definitely not one of those artists that just shows up and does her
Right.
vocal and stuff.
Right.
But annoyingly so. I think she even apologized and stuff. But I found this one thing that she liked, this tremolo chord, and on the record, that's kind of the one thing you hear from me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And she called it like a desperado chord or something. Hey, I'll take that anytime I can get it. That's always better than being wiped or them not using anything.
Yeah. What about one of the favorite ones I had on Waiting to Exhale was what you did on that Brandy song with like the wah.
Yeah.
Like the really cool pads that you had on.
Yeah, sitting up in my room.
Yeah.
That whole little section, even though the bass line was a rip from Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, they did that on purpose, but that whole little sort of wash thing and then the reverse stuff I did.
Yeah.
I think that was the second song I played on. So after the first one, which I didn't get to do stuff on, that's funny because I'm thinking that intro with the wah and the pads and the reverse guitar stuff was my first chance to show Kenny like all the cool stuff I can do.
Oh yeah, those pads are funky, man. They're great. Do you remember what wah you used for that?
That was a pretty big hit too.
Was that your Buddha wah, the purple one?
It was.
Yeah.
Which to this day I've loved. They all actually sound good to me, and I'm not a wah guy, as I've told you before. When I need to do a wah part, I physically go get it, plug it in, do the part, and then put it back up in my closet.
Yeah. Yeah, but those are some really great pads. I really like the stuff that you did on all of Waiting to Exhale was great, and then
that's cool that you even listened to that. What the hell were you doing listening to that?
Well, my parents had a pretty eclectic musical taste, and they were listening to all sorts of stuff, and
wow,
and then Waiting to Exhale, I think was just I remember my mom and her girlfriends would go and see movies together, and I remember she bought the CD, and when we drive to school every day, whatever she was listening to would be in the car invariably. I remember that was in the car for like 6 months, or if you go on a road trip, we would just hear that several times. It was kind of before people had a big sort of Rolodex of CDs. In our car, we had a 90, early to mid 90s Nissan Maxima, and it was like the first year they had CD players in them, and it was like a single disc. So it's kind of like you couldn't have like 6 of them in there, and rotate them and stuff like that. So they'd stay in there for a while, and a lot of them were those things. Like she had that Babyface one with Kenny G and Mariah Carey that was on there a lot. It had Boys to Men 2, which a lot of those were Babyface songs.
Yeah, they were. Man, he just had his finger on the pulse of, and to this day, that production style, it's clean, it's good. It's just, he's a real pop song guy.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting that there was a really stark contrast though, when almost like you stopped hearing Babyface like altogether, like by the time the late 90s hit.
Yeah, and he started sort of, because I was still working with him through that period, and he started chasing a little bit like what was going on in like he had me make him this whole sample library, and I started out, I was gonna do it like he wanted a nylon guitar sample library, so I started like doing like all the chords all over the neck and all this stuff, right? But I hated it. It drove me crazy. I remember I was making it to ADATs, and I started throwing in little licks, like, or something, like when I was doing the nylon string stuff, and I threw in a bunch of them, and like he had his engineer. He took a long time to do it, but he like put it out on a keyboard, all the samples that I had done, right? Yeah. Laid it out in a way for Kenny to use for songwriting, right? And he found that what he was using were those licks, those little sort of characteristic lick kind of things. And so he had me do another like really kind of well, that was a nylon string. Then I did an electric guitar one with just like a lot of like fills, little Curtis Mayfield stuff, little slidey stuff, little things. And again, he had that guy, like, he took those samples and stretched them and did stuff to them and laid it out. I think it filled up like 5 keyboards or something like that. It was a mammoth job that this guy had to do. And he paid me well to do that and stuff, but that was in his phase when he was trying to use samples and from my take on it, it was like trying to sort of, it's like all the rap and hip hop stuff where they just idolize the hell out of him. He was sort of trying to do like, it's like the kids dig this stuff, you know, and I guess he wrote some tunes off some of those things and stuff. And then he started making records again that we really liked and stuff. But and it wasn't like we ever had a falling out or something, but we had a nice little sort of run there of doing tunes.
Yeah, and when you're telling me about the single note thing, it reminds me of kind of like the stories about Mutt Lange and Def Leppard, where he would record stuff one note at a time. Because you started working with him after that, right? You were working with Mutt Lange.
Yeah, and I got to ask him a bunch of my geeky Mutt Lange, because he was such almost like a fictional character. There was such a mystique to Mutt Lange.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you, like most of us, I pored over those Def Leppard records, especially Def Leppard. Of course, the AC/DC was killer, and the Cars record was killer, and everything he touched was killer. But the Def Leppard stuff, for me, the layering, the clean guitars, the 8-note chunk stuff, I mean, it was just perfect. It was perfect in a way that had feeling, which was kind of like, it set the bar really high, and that was something that I mean, I didn't even dare to dream about getting a chance to work with Mutt Lange, and talk about a small closed-in thing. It's like I didn't even know anyone, that had anything to do with him. And then, Dan Huff became his guy. That I think Dan did 2 Shania records with him. And I remember Dan telling me because the thing about Mutt is he works these crazy hours that it's really hard. Like when I did the Up album, the Shania album, I did a week with him in Italy, because I was in Italy doing this guy Adriano Celentano's album, and it was getting towards the, they were having to start mixing and stuff, and he was I guess I might as well tell you, I actually had the phone call. It was on my message machine where I got home, hit the message machine, and he's like, "Hi, he's not from England, but he's from Rhodesia, actually. It was called Rhodesia back then.
But now it's what, Zimbabwe? Is that like, Zimbabwe? Is Zimbabwe Rhodesia?
Yeah, Zimbabwe. But so he's like, "Hi, Michael, this is Mutt Lange." What? I wondered if you'd be interested in working on my wife's album with me. Like, let me think, So I actually had that, and it was a message machine that had the little tape. Somewhere I have the little mini cassette that has that on it, And so so I called him and I told him, well, I'm leaving to go to Italy to do this record next week. And he said, great, we'll come to you. And he was in, Switzerland. So they took the train to Italy, and we worked in, that first week we worked in just this kind of funky studio. And I remember it was like, the beginning of the summer, and like the AC wasn't even really cranking and stuff, but it was just me and Mutt and his engineer, this guy Kevin Shirko, and so at first, like, again, there was a couch behind me with Mutt sitting on it, but I'd much rather have had him there than Madonna saying, "No, I don't like that," right in my ear. But so he'd have one of my guitars, and I'd hear him like doing like or some little simple part, right?
Yeah.
But I'm working on another part,
and
I'm thinking, okay, he's playing my next part back there, And so until he got to know me a little more, he was kind of giving me the the basic part, and then I would embellish it and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember at one point saying, "Hey, why don't you just play all the guitars on this stuff?" He said, "I ain't got the grease like you, mate." and that's what he called it, and that's what Dan Huff did. He did the grease stuff, where it's the sort of upfront guitar that where you got to have that grease, you know. So he would use, because I came in and there was already a bunch of guitars, like sort of the meat and potatoes kind of guitars, already down, and I always suspected that he played guitar on, not on the Def Leppard records, but on Shania's records, and sure enough, he did, and he never credits himself with guitar. It's only like background vocals or something. But so there was sort of the building blocks were there as far as those kind of parts. But then it was perfect because I would be playing stuff on top of that, you know, which could really utilize what I do, you know. And so like the more he kind of saw me do my thing, the more he kind of let me go, you know. But at first he was sort of like feeding me those parts, and so that was a week, and I played. So the hours, dig this, 11 a.m. to 3 a.m.
Wow.
So the first day is 11 to 3, and you're sitting on your butt the whole time playing, and it's the you show, you know. It's no like, okay, I'm going to take a break for a few hours, and you gotta. And I was ready for it because Dan had told me, and I was ready for it. I was like, I know this guy works insane hours, and I like to work hard and stuff, but after a while, man, your butt just gets killing you, you know. And so, you know, and of course I'm wanting to do good and everything, and so we're standing out in front of this studio at 3 a.m, and he says, "Right, so what time tomorrow morning?" And I said, "Oh man," because I'm thinking I got to go to my hotel, I got to get some sleep, and I said, "How about 11?" And he said, 11? Oh, okay, 11. Right, and the engineer pulls me aside and he goes, "Thank you, man. If you had left it up to him, he would have said, you know, like 8 a.m. or something like that, or 9. You know, it's like 11 was early for me. I mean, it's 3 a.m. You know, so that's what it was. It was so we were in at 11 to 3, 11 to 3, 11 to 3. You know, and basically spending all those hours on one song.
Wow.
So the first day we got a song. Second day we got another song. And, you know, and it was like he never like drummed it into the ground where you just hate the part and you're just sick of playing it. But what he would do, which I did ask him, like, what did you ever do before Pro Tools, you know? And he said with Def Leppard, they'd be sitting in the control room with like a tape between them spread out with scissors and literally be cutting up this tape, you know, and stuff. So Pro Tools is perfect for him. And he would do this thing where he would, like, if, say, I was playing the verse part, he would just leave it in loop record and do, like, what felt like 5 minutes of me playing the verse, or maybe 3 minutes of me playing the verse or something. And who knows, like, whatever the, you know, something like that, you're playing and you're throwing in little stuff, right? And he would remember that like 11 times back you had a good chicka, and like 17 times back you had a good brang. And then like after I recorded all that, he would take like 15 minutes and make this killer comp of the best stuff you played.
Wow.
And then you'd move on to like the B section and work on that for like an hour, you know, or something.
Wow.
And so it was like you were working and getting stuff done, but it was you know, and God bless him, he loves guitar parts and stuff. So there's a lot of opportunity, as opposed to David, who wanted the one guitar part through the tune, you know. So it was a sense of accomplishment that you made it to the end when you got there and stuff. But that was the tough thing.
Yeah.
The hours, and it didn't let up. So we did a week. So I did 7 tunes, but there were 18 on the album, right? And so I immediately started thinking, man, I'd like a chance to play on the rest of it. And so he asked me about, how would you feel about coming to Switzerland to do some other stuff. He was leaving there to go to the Bahamas to the studio called Compass Point that I worked there a couple of times and stuff. And he didn't want to work in the States. He was really down on the States because he had this big farm in upstate New York that, like, I don't know the thing, like it had a lake on it and they built a beach or something to the lake and they didn't get permits to do it or something. So the townspeople like rose up against them or something and they got slapped with some injunctions or some shit. And so he's like, fuck it. And just moved, right? So he was kind of down on doing anything in the States. I don't know what that's about. But so I did end up, so he went to not to Nashville, to Compass Point, and had the Nashville musicians come out there to do their stuff. And the way he did it with them was like the opposite of me doing, 18 hours of me straight. They would have like a couple of fiddle players, Brent Mason, maybe Paul Lime, an acoustic guitar player. And he'd do like a couple of hours with, say, the fiddle players while everyone else was hanging at the pool.
Yeah.
And then at 1 a.m, okay, Brent, we're ready for you. And he'd come in and play on some stuff. Right. And so that was much more of like a hang until you're called kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they would do it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate hanging and waiting at studios. That's like my least favorite thing in the world. So even though it was hard work, I would much rather have had it be the way it was for me, where I was working the whole time.
Yeah. And was all that stuff still the hit maker and the car amp at that time, or had it evolved?
I remember like I kind of had the kitchen sink at that point. I had a big rack and I had, my standby. The H3000's been there on every single song I ever played on that one patch. I've already said that a bunch of times. But I remember I had gotten this head from that guy, Top Hat.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Top Hat?
Yeah, I do.
And it was called the Implexidor.
Okay.
And I remember I got it right before I left on this trip over there to do all this recording. And it sounded good. It sounded really good. But I noticed that like when I did any kind of lead stuff, it got ghost notes like really bad, which in the track you couldn't hear it. And most of the stuff I was using it for, and that was the crank stuff, which sounds really good, just Marshall-y kind of crank stuff. But I think that was the thing that soured me on that amp. Ultimately, it was like, to me, it was just too much of like, you're holding a high note and you're hearing like, some low note,
right,
ghosting it kind of thing. I mean, some people like that, I guess. But anyway, so I had that amp and I had, my trusty car for sure. Which also, I got to say, was on every single clean part I ever did for a good, 10 years. That the car slant 6 feet.
Yeah. What year?
I had it cut down to a head.
What year did you get it, you think?
I think early 90's.
So is that on the Tony Braxton stuff too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was on everything. It's still, to me, the best. It's like the closest thing to a direct clean sound. Something about the way it's designed. Like a lot of Fenders, they sound amazing for clean and stuff, but they have a lot of bottom to them. Something about the car had the perfect amount of not too much bottom.
Yeah.
So you could do like a clean Strat chord kind of thing, and it had that high fidelity sort of presence that I only seem to be able to get from direct, but so that's still in my arsenal, and I thank them for, I bought that amp. I never had any kind of endorsement thing with them, but I think it got back to Steve Carr that I was using his amp and stuff. But no, so I had that for sure, and that Implexidor thing for like the cranked stuff. I might have had one other kind of thing. And I've always sort of had an alternate like direct thing I can do when I want that sound too. Because that's an actual one of the sounds in your arsenal, that that like when nothing else will do, you have to actually do that. You know?
Yeah. What about like? Did you play on the Tony Braxton record? Did you play the intro on "You're Making Me High"?
No. 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 I played on one of those Exhale songs. I've only and then I think on "Break My Heart."
Yeah.
I have played on something else, but it's not. You can't hear it that well. But there's a good clean guitar, clean Strat part on "Unbreak My Heart."
Yeah, yeah.
You can hear it in the intro a little bit, and then at the end, there's even like power chords and stuff that are way back there. But I'll never forget coming in again at the record plant and hearing that song. Like halfway through the song, I went, "This is a smash hit. No two ways about it." It just and Tony's keeper vocals were on there and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I did my usual thing with David, you know, a clean Strat thing through the tune, and then we did some beefy. And then like I begged him to let me play the nylon part because I was actually you know, back in those days, playing nylon on not with the real, you know, there's a guy named Ramon Stagnaro who's the best guy in the world at it, and after a while, people got hip to like when you have a nylon part, you got to get him to play it, right? But back in those days, on like Julio Iglesias and stuff like that, I you know, I mean, I can do some nice little nylon stuff, and so. You know, "Unbreak My Heart" was so sexy and such a great song, and I'd done my electric guitars, and there was a real, like a written, you know, nylon string part. So I begged David to let me play it, and he had Dean booked for the next morning, and he wasn't going to unbook him.
Yeah.
And for Dean's sake, I'm glad that David, well, he was, you know, he wasn't going to let me play it, but I wanted to play it just because I loved the song so much, and I wanted to, you know. So, and that's, of course, the nylon is the featured instrument on that track. But it's one of those things, you know. It's weird. You're talking about the isolated tracks. A few years ago, that guy Humberto was doing some kind of remix of that song, and he sent me the isolated electric guitar tracks for "Unbreak My Heart."
Oh, wow.
It was just something he did. It wasn't like on YouTube or anything.
Yeah.
And I went, damn. I mean, like, you wouldn't be able to hear most of it on the record that much. That was one of those tunes that was really, I'm in there, but like, you know, could have been a lot more featured because it was all about the nylon and the sexy pads and stuff. But it was really a good part. I kind of dug it, you know?
Yeah. Somebody in the comments asked about "Let It Flow." Were you on that one?
I know that there's one that I'm forgetting the title of that was that on the Exhale?
I think so. It kind of had, it sounded more like a steel string acoustic in the beginning, kind of like a hammer.
That's definitely Kenny on that.
Okay.
But any electric stuff on that, I think I did do, because there was, well, I mean, you can look on the credits. There was like 7 tunes on that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many great songs there. Now, like, for stuff like that though, like on, I mean, whether it's the Babyface stuff or the, you know, the pads that you were doing for Brandy, or whether it's, you know, the stuff that you were doing for Celine Dion. I mean, you know, you said that you thought you would be coming to these charts that were pretty well developed, but a lot of it, they were just wanting you to do your thing. Like, how do you, what does like your mental process look like when you're trying to prepare? Like, all right, I'm listening to, you know, whatever the sketch, you know, that they have kind of right now. Like, what does your mental process look like when you're going to start approaching these passes?
Well, it seems like 99% of the time it was that thing I described with David, where they put up the track and you start playing. And you just, I mean, my approach is, if this was my song, what would I play? I start there. A lot of the time people have specific ideas, and I don't want to hear their idea. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I figure the thing that with my whole career and my playing and what I like in music, I mean, I consider myself a pop guitarist. I love pop music, R&B, rock, pop, the music of the people, right? And so the stuff I tend to like, I found most other people like it too. So that was my starting point, and like I said with David, I mean, he'd hear one thing he liked or a couple of little seeds of an idea or something, and you take it from there, and you're feeding off the reaction you're getting, if you're seeing people grooving, but every now and then you got like a producer that almost was like, for my way of working, getting in the way of himself by, either second guessing or, I remember I did a tune once with, Babyface, David Foster, and Mutt Lange, Quincy, maybe Phil Ramone. I mean, there's like a handful of people that I respect as like producers then there's like other people that I either, and there weren't too many of them, but it's either like you just personally didn't get on with them like you did with most other people, or you don't like their style of producing and stuff. But
I was saying when you were gone to the people that were watching, I said, hey, this is the Producers Guild was going to cut the feed, because you're about to drop the bombshell.
I was, and you know what? I should learn my lesson to not ever bag on anyone, because it gave me a minute to think about it.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, all I was going to do was recount this one session that I remembered where I was like, I was playing down the tune and I got to the chorus and I came up with like my guitar part for the chorus. And the guy, and I like doubled it and it sounded good and everything. And then he started saying like, how about if you try blah, blah, blah. How about if you try, and like it went way away from my original thing. And so we did his idea for the chorus and then did the next verse and got to the end of the song. And so I'm at the end of the song and I'm like, not really having fun and stuff and thinking I'm done. And he's like, remember the first thing you played on the chorus? And I'm like, yeah. How about if I don't think my idea was as good. I was like, come on, man. Anyway, that's all that was leading up to.
Yeah.
And he's a great producer and stuff, but it was just that it was never fun with him.
Yeah. Well, for you, Michael, I want to get into another part of this, which is some of your favorite recommended pieces of equipment that you think are sort of like, if somebody wants to go after the legendary Michael Thompson sound, what are some of the key ingredients that you feel like are important for the sound that you go for, like either in terms of pedals, rack gear, stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the clean sound, which to me, that was kind of much more my bread and butter than anything else. Of course, on every song, or not on every song, but on a lot of the songs, like the tunes I do here, which is 99% of my work and has been for quite a while, I'll typically do acoustic guitars because they just fit on so many songs. Then I'll do the clean guitars, which work well. It's like, to me, it's the next thing you put on after the acoustic guitars, right? Then a lot of the time, even when you don't think like power chords, not big heavy metal power chords, but power chords in sort of mixed back in the track and stuff, they still work great, and so I'll do those. Then if there's a solo, I'll do that. And then I'll do a pass sometimes of just like sort of ethereal textured stuff. That's just sort of like what I do. But all that to say that I live in the clean world more than anything,
Yeah.
And so that being able to get a great, clean, I mean, we always think, or I do, and a lot of us do, think of that clean sound as that. I noticed Paul had his trusty Bartolini, mahogany Strat or whatever. And I'll never forget having, like, I had the engineer, because we used to play on a lot of stuff together where I'd come in and Paul would have played on it. and like getting him to solo his tracks. And it just, man, I mean, it was just perfect, and it was a great sound, and it was like compressed, and of course his pocket was just flawless and stuff. But I would just die over that, man, that sound. And so, like I said, I initially could only get that sound direct, so I had I remember you guys on the Paul Jackson thing were talking about the tap delay, the ADA tap delay.
Yeah, the STD.
I had one of those.
Yeah.
And I got it because Alan Holdsworth had one. And I remember it was kind of an expensive piece for me, especially because I had it in the 80s,
Yeah.
And I think it was like $649 or something like that, which it was basically a chorus. They called it a tap delay, so I always thought like it had delays in it, but
right.
Yeah, it just went up to Paul was saying maybe it's 50 milliseconds or something, but it had a really good chorus sound. But if you put both sides left and right on the chorus, it was too phasey and it was weird. But like if you just put one side on, which was kind of the Boss chorus thing, just one side warbling, it was a really good chorus sound. So that I had like three things in this rack, that a DBX 160, a TC EQ, that EQ they had, the one space,
yeah,
which was between the compressor and that was my tone shape, that was my amp, right? And then I went into the 88 tap delay. And after a while, I got a delay, an actual delay, but I used to have to get the engineer to put up a delay on my sound, right? And I remember like most studios had a PCM 70.
Yeah.
And early on, I had been doing this album, and this great engineer, this guy Don Murray, put up this patch called Bouncing BPM, right? And it was like, oh, it was just gorgeous, and it was like, gave you left, right delays, and I think it had a little verb in the patch and stuff too. So I would request that, when I could. And so that was my, and with the Strat, the important thing was, so this is a big roundabout way to say you got to get a really good sounding Strat that has, like, the pickups have to be either single coil or, I mean, now they're making a lot of good noiseless pickups that you can get that sound,
Yeah.
But to me, that middle bridge sound almost has to be an honest to God, single coil to get that. And I find that having a preamp in the guitar, like I have all these years, it's this guy, Jim Kaufman. He doesn't even like advertise that he makes these things because he makes those Sunrise pickups for acoustic guitars.
Right.
But if you ask, I think they're $150 or something. It's his clean preamp. He used to be partners with Demeter, and Demeter always made that mid-range preamp, which I didn't dig because, I mean, it was great for solos and stuff. But the cool thing about the Kaufman was that it just boosted the signal of the guitar, but it added this glassiness that just, it was like a voodoo factor. But when I hit on that, it was like, whoa, this is something. So anyway, you got to start with the guitar that has the good Stratty glassy thing going. And then, I'm like a compressor freak. And I tell you, man, I can't get it out of one compressor. For the longest time now, I've been using two compressors.
Which
like
ones?
For that really, and I mix it up. But the ones I currently have are the, what is the name of that? Oh, it's called the Fat General.
Fat General, who makes that?
Thorpe Effects.
Oh, okay.
It's this English company.
Okay, yeah, I know them.
And then I found out that it's the guy that made those great Love Tone things with some other guy that they're whatever that is. Which that's a really good quiet compressor that has like a treble knob that you can add some really nice highs with that. But it doesn't. You can make it so it squishes it out, but kind of that on the setting that the blend is like 50-50. that, and then, man, what I've been putting in front of it is that Analog Man orange squeezer, which I have in a double pedal,
Right.
that has like a Ross compressor. I think they call it the bi compressor or something.
Yeah.
Bicomp. A friend of mine, he sadly passed away a couple of years ago. This guy Dan Warner gave it to me because he was so like he had to learn my parts and stuff a lot for a couple of artists he was working with, and he would, speaking of like soloing your tracks, he would get this producer in Miami, this guy Rudy Perez that we both work for, to like solo my tracks, and it's like, man, how does he get that sound, you know? And that's always a cool thing when you hear like a really great guy wants to hear your track solo and stuff.
Yeah.
So he gave me that compressor, and you know, for a lot of years I used it, and then like live it would always almost like squash too much and stuff. But there's something about, and I always loved the original orange squeezer. I had the one that plugged into your guitar in the early 80s. That was like, man, that thing. Because you could use it for like cranked. You could just leave it on all the time. You know, it was pretty cool. And so when I really, really want the over the top squash thing, I'll put that one on with the other compressor. Yeah. And then if I'm, so I'll tailor the part to do with like how much. Like if you're doing like a, like a muted funk thing, you want a lot of squishy comp. You know. Yeah. But highs too. That's the thing about a lot of the compressors. They don't. They dull it, and they don't have that adding the highs. But I have not tried your Nile.
Oh yeah, we need to get you one of those.
Which you've threatened to let me try one of these days.
No, I'll send you one tomorrow.
Of course I've been interested in that all along, and it sounded great in the clips you've done. But
and it's got that Neve mic pre thing in it too, so you can get some cool stuff out of it by overdriving it. Like I really like it. Like I don't use it as a compressor that often because I don't really use compressors too much, and so I kind of wanted to make it so. What I like using it for is like with the Les Paul and kind of doing that Lindsey Buckingham thing where he would overdrive he'd use it like an LA2A or an 1176 to overdrive a mic pre that was like part of the distortion sound on like Rumors and stuff like that. Yeah. And I think it sounds really cool for that. But I mean, also just as a compressor, it sounds great. But, sometimes compressors can be unusable with humbuckers, or it's not as cool.
I know. On that tip, this guy, Rocket, J Rocket pedals. Chris
Van Tassel.
Chris Van Tassel, just through good old Facebook, we've sort of gone back and forth a little bit. Nice cat. I've bought. Man, I own like their early stuff that they don't even make anymore.
Yeah, the big box stuff.
They don't make it anymore. But they made that one called the IQ compressor, right?
Yeah.
That, of course, if it's a compressor, I'm interested, right, in the fact that it had the graphic EQ on it.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, that's good, because usually especially for live, I've found that like you want a compressor and then you want to add some highs and stuff with some kind of EQ unit after it, But so he sent me one of those, and I found that for that, like for soloing like distortion leads and stuff, it's really great. As a squishy stratty kind of compressor, it's not. It almost. It's kind of got that Dynacomp type of compression, but it really has a lot, and you only have the one knob. So just putting a little bit on, and then if you like the frequencies that they have on the graphic are more. It seems like it's more suited for distortion.
Yeah.
And so like all these clips I've been doing, that melody series. Yeah. They all have that IQ compressed, because I'll have my sound up and it'll be pretty singing and I'm getting good sustain, and then I'll put that on and it doesn't sound like you put a compressor on it or something. It's a little smoother and it's got a little sexier sustain. So that wasn't even a purpose I set out to use that for,
What about the milk box? You turned me onto that compressor a long time.
I know. What is that inside that thing, man?
All right. So this is cool. I figured it out.
By the way, I got to tell the people that you and I, one of these years, will actually make it happen. But we talked about doing a pedal called the MT Clean Machine.
Yeah, I'm still up to doing it.
But I gave you that DOD milk box compressor, which was my compressor.
Yeah, it's sitting right here
for many years.
So what it is. It was a collaboration when Harman had bought DBX, and Harman also owns DOD and Digitech, and it is a version of a DBX 160 in a pedal.
Really?
It's very similar to it.
But they put a lot of squish into it.
Well, you can't make it as subtle as you can make a DBX 160. But
that's what I was thinking. Those are way more. Well, they're way more even and stuff. The thing about the milk box that I did like is that thing I've been describing where I have to use two compressors.
Yeah,
it had it for that sound, but it almost is like there was a sweet spot with the compression that, like, if you put less than that, it's not doing its thing, and then you put it and it's like almost too much compression.
Yeah.
But then that had that expander thing that you could add highs. You could
add that high end, yeah.
It's a pretty cool pedal.
It is.
But and I always had my settings on it where the release was like halfway up. But then, like, years after using it, I tried putting the release like a real fast, or not the release, the attack, like a fast attack, and it really like pumps and breathes and not cool, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it was like, but I loved that it was so over the top. That's why I gave you that. Like, if we could have that sort of aspect, and then adding like the highs that we were talking about, being able to add in.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe the Nile does that, but
well, no, you'll play it and you can tell me. The other one that actually is really close to 160 is the Robert Keeley. What is it? The GC2. Did you ever play that one?
First one?
No.
I have that first one. That was another good squishy one.
No, it's black and it has kind of red text and black knobs.
Huh.
And it's very similar to the 160.
Yeah. It's a weird thing because, like, the quieter and the more subtle and the more transparent they make these, a lot of the opto compressors and stuff, it's like that thing we want goes away.
Right.
It's like, I didn't want it subtle.
Right.
But it's a fine line, because if it's raggedy or, you know, noisy or stuff, you don't want that either. Because when you're doing a clean part and it's very naked, you know, you got to like not have a noisy compressor doing it. But the milk box, the late great milk box, and it was so cheap that I always almost felt like, shouldn't I have a more expensive compressor and stuff? But a couple of guys like Dean Parks and stuff started using it because I was using it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I did see
well,
that
it started to look kind of silly, though. The version you gave me is got regular names for knobs, but then they did one that had like all dairy themed renames for the knobs.
Didn't the one I gave you have that?
No. It says like high expand and attack and compress and level, and then there was a later one that said like cream percentage,
right, and like curdle and stuff.
And you know, like.
And speaking of that pedal, not to go on and on about stuff, but I remember with Paul yesterday, you mentioned my horrible nightmare gig.
Yeah, wasn't that the milk box? I thought that you told me that was the culprit.
Yes, it was. It was, but it was the input to it, just the stupid jack.
Oh, okay.
And the screen was coming up 10, 9, 8, and it was the Grammys. And I was down on my knees. And of course, I should have, well, I didn't even know you then, but I used to make, and I still do, I just throw together my own pedal boards when I need them, right? Which, if you have anything serious to do, that is not being a very responsible musician at all, right? But the drag was, for 5 days of rehearsal, it worked fine. And so you move it to the Grammys and they set it out on the stage and you have 10, you know, or we only had like 30 seconds to get out there, get set up, and I'm getting no sound.
Yeah.
And so I'm really starting to panic, and the guy said, end in 10, 9, and I'm on my knees, and I just start jiggling around shit. All of a sudden, my thing comes on, you know, and so I got, because I was 1 second away from unplugging out of my pedal board and plugging straight in this AC30. which would have sucked because I had one part of it was a medley. It was with the Backstreet Boys and I needed delay for this one part of it, and I needed distortion for this other part. It was something I needed that pedal board, So at the last second, it came roaring on. I think he might have been on like 3, 2, 1, bam. And so my shit came on, and I came home and promptly threw that pedal in the closet. That might have been the one I gave you.
And did you? Because I guess you said that you need Warner. He was the one that was doing a lot of those Backstreet and NSYNC stuff, right?
Yeah,
he's in Florida. He's a Florida guy.
Yeah, Miami. You know your players. No, and then he got into producing a lot of Latin artists and stuff. He was a good cat, and man, he just went. He was jamming with some guys at a club after a session, and he finished the set and just went backstage and keeled over dead.
Yeah.
And he had no heart trouble before that.
Yeah.
And, so that was a real loss.
Real
but that pedal still of the pedals that have tried to recreate the Orange Squeezer.
Yeah.
That one to me seemed like the real deal because I did have a real one back in the day, and that it has that same kind of excitement to it, whatever that is.
Have you found anything that does an H3000 in a pedal format for your particular type of?
No, I heard Paul talking about the H9, which I have never. I know they're great. Pete Thorne was saying he can get really close to it and stuff. It's sort of a subtle thing, but I have an Eclipse too, which is my other piece of gear. It's really the two of those things. That when you put up that same micro pitch shift patch on that, and of course when it comes up, it's just like a delay, like a chorus,
right?
+9 and -9, or you can make it plus and minus whatever you want, but it comes up plus and minus 9, which is I think I just totally like messing with it. Tried making longer delays. There's a thing on it called P delay. I'm actually looking at it right here. Yeah, it's called P delay, pitch delay, I guess. And you would assume, it's just going to be really short because it's just a chorus patch, But to my amazement, it goes up. It goes up to like 6. I think it goes up to 650. And then the other thing was that the modulation ate up. It worked out to 30 milliseconds. So you had to, if your delay time's supposed to be 500 milliseconds, you got to set it at 470. And so I got very good at minusing 30 milliseconds. But all that to say that the Eclipse, which has like 7 times the power that the H3000, and my H3000 is a DSE, by the way, which has a lot more cool patches than the SE, I think, was the original one I had. But the original one had that micro pitch shift thing, which basically I only used that patch anyway. But comparing them side by side, those two patches, one in the Eclipse, one in that. The Eclipse one it's like it's almost too clean and pristine sounding, and not that the H3000 is like, distorted or gritty or anything, but it has a coarseness, a little bit of a graininess or something that makes it almost more musical and earthy sounding to me. And I don't know if it's my imagination. I have a beat 'em. And there's definitely a thing to that. So whether the H9 can get that, but most guys are using it on their live pedal boards and stuff, and it's a fantastic box that does a lot of things. Yeah. But I found with pedals, I personally prefer a pedal, even if it does this one very narrow thing, I'd rather have it do that than... So I've never been a big multi-effects player. But then again, I haven't been a big, road guy or something too, where you would want a unit that could cover those bases.
We should compare, when we're able to be in public, with other people. I'll come over and I'll bring the H9 and we can see how close we can get.
Yeah, and I've heard it, and it's a great box. I'm amazed that my Eventide that I've had since 1992 or whenever. I mean, I have had to have it fixed a couple of times, but just the fact that it still works. And one thing I found out about it when I had the big rack, they get incredibly hot. And I had like this, I have this Moog, this SE1 that actually I fell in love with that sound. I mean, I was in love with that sound back from Stevie Wonder albums and stuff, but Babyface had it. That first tune I played with him, actually before Waiting to Exhale, or maybe that was after, but that Every Time I Close My Eyes thing. Oh shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. Senior moment.
It was something about this Moog device that Babyface had.
Oh yeah. So that tune had this wee wee kind of sound on it. I'm like, what did you do that with, right? And he said, well, that's this Studio Electronics SE1, and it's just mono. So he had like two that, like when we did that MTV thing, that the guy that played that thing had two of them, so he could do one note, yada yada. But I went that day to West LA Music and bought an SE1 and the Roland synth pickup and the Roland GR whatever to plug it into.
Yeah.
And I was in business, man. I had that sound. And actually, like on a lot of those David Foster records, when you hear that Moog sound, that's me. And a keyboard player could sound close to it, but I would run it through my guitar rig. So I had my delays and my stuff on it, and sometimes I'd even run it through like the speakers and stuff. So it would have a different sound, and I would use my good old, speaking of pieces of gear, another one, the one that's been with me all along, is the VB2.
The Boss, yeah.
VB2.
I have one somewhere.
Which is an amazing pedal. It's like my clutch. My right foot is on my volume pedal, and my left foot is on the VB2. When I'm doing the... any kind of atmospheric thing or the volume pedal thing and stuff, because it's so brilliant, because you play the chord and you volume it up, and as you're voluming it up, you hit the VB2, and it has that rise factor, so it just comes in on and vibratos your delays,
Right. So you have it in the latch position always.
Another funny thing about that pedal was I got it in like... might have been the late 80s, and never tried it in the latch mode. It was either on or off.
Right.
And I found that it was too seasick sounding to use. It wasn't like a usable... in fact, like vibrato in general is very hard to... it's a really cool sound, but it's hard to use it in a track where it isn't too seasick sounding anyway. So... I was watching Saturday Night Live, and I forget what band it was, but the guy was stepping forward and stepping down on a pedal and getting a nice waver, right? And like this huge light bulb went off, and I'm like, that's that pedal I have. And I had taken it out of my rig and stuff. And I remember going down to my studio that night, getting it out, going, oh shit, latch mode. And I put it on that, and saw that you step down on it and you get the vibrato, and the rest is history. But that was like it still is part of my thing.
Yeah.
And then I have the reissue now, which is quieter, and it's quieter. The other one had a little hiss to it that I guess was on all the time, but I had my volume pedal after it, so you didn't really notice it. But
how close do you feel like the Wazacraft one sounds to the original?
It sounds great. It sounds exactly like it. Then there's like a stronger vibrato that I never used. That it's the thing they added to it.
So you now use the reissue one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still have my other one, and it still works.
Yeah.
But I remember the only time in my career that I had, like, I never had a Bradshaw. I couldn't afford one, shit, back in the 80s.
Do you remember how much they were back then, approximately?
Was it? I think it was like, 2 or 3. It was like 3,000. Like just to have for the system, not for all the stuff in it.
Right.
It was way beyond my scope. That's why I started putting together rigs myself. And like I told you, I got that 2290 and got the ADA tap delay and sort of pieced together a little bit of a rig and stuff. But in like the early 90s, well, like maybe 94 or something like that, I had Dave Friedman do me a rig, a pedal rack, the big rack, all the wiring. And Dave does amazing work and everything, not to slag him at all, but I changed things so much that I found myself starting to like undo his, like the beautiful like cable work and stuff like that. And one time I got to a session, and I remember Paul saying that yesterday, and was getting no sound. It was shortly after I had finally gotten this incredible system from him. I show up, literally was not getting any sound at all. And it was this big, panic and calling him and try this and try that. And it was some stupid MIDI thing or something. But it got me thinking, it's like when I do my own rigs, I know where every wire is,
Yeah.
And, so... and the other thing about that, and I know I skip around a lot, but the other thing about having the pedal rack was that it was like out of sight, out of mind. I had great pedals on a bunch of different drawers, but like if I'm not seeing them at my feet, I forget about them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I talked to Tom Bukovac about this, because I've built him a couple of rigs, and he, and he has everything on the floor, and he doesn't use any sort of MIDI programming, anything like that. It's all everything in series in front, or maybe he has a true bypass looper, but no MIDI. And he said, the hardest thing is that when you're in the heat of a moment, and at that time he was doing a lot of Dan Huff stuff, where Dan Huff was producing and then Tom was the player. Like he can't make adjustments very quickly if he has to see stuff, or he has to go into a menu and scroll for stuff. And that's part of the beauty of why he liked the Line 6 M9, because you had sort of the weird effects in there, even though maybe they weren't as good as any individual effect that did vibrato or whatever. But everything had a knob, and so he could easily get into it quickly, make adjustments. Because time is money on those sessions, and this more than anybody. And so he was just like, I needed to have everything right there. I needed to be able to turn knobs. I couldn't do stuff with a laptop or an iPad or whatever. It's not practical. Yeah.
He's fantastic, by the way. I've really loved these homeschooling things he's been doing. I love the part where he's playing, and when he starts answering questions and stuff. Maybe I don't see all of them, but there's a lot of different. I just had sort of not a unique thing, but like as far as not needing to be able to like go from this sound to that sound within the course of tracking a tune. Yeah. Which is always really helpful to have. I mean, any kind of movie date, you'd kind of need that. And of course live stuff. And it just makes it real convenient when you're sitting there to just hit a switch and have it go to that. But I guess it's part, like I see these things, Tim Pierce in his studio, and he has like choice of 4 heads and stuff. Like those guys that built that head switcher, I actually have their preamp. They're called Kahayan.
Yeah, I have one of their head switchers and cap switchers in our Burbank.
And the guy was almost like begging me to take this head switcher, but I knew flat out that I would never use it, and I wouldn't even hook it up because I have absolutely no use for it, right? Because I actually like to physically go, okay, because I'm working on a part for a while, and I'm my guitar into this pedal, into this thing, into this amp, and then, okay, now we're going to do the power guitars. Let me try this and get this guitar, audition a couple of booster pedals or overdrives, and I've always been kind of like that. It sort of gives you the break between sounds, and And because I didn't need to go, and believe me, there were many times I would have liked to been able to really easily go from one thing to another. And I always made it so for gigs and stuff that I could do that, you know. Actually, I was telling you yesterday that for the last couple of years I've used that Synergy system.
Yeah.
And that's worked really well. And live, it's been just a pleasure to have like choice of 4 different, you know, the 2 preamps, but 2 different sounds on each one.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the time you don't even need that many sounds, but it's been really great. And then the way they're, I have the stereo one, you know, the way their stereo effects loop works is really great. And so gear-wise, I have that in my studio, the Synergy with a pedal board that has a Strymon El Capistan. You know all about my Strymon stuff because I've gotten it through you. I have a mini vent.
Yeah.
I have this Free the Tone chorus that's like a really good tri-stereo chorus in a box that these Japanese guys make.
All right, I'm gonna hip you to some new ones too. By the way,
what's that?
I'm gonna hip you to a new tri-stereo chorus pedal.
Oh, and I got to tell you, I'm not a big tri-stereo chorus guy. That was Landau's thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I used that that Eventide patch, even though it was delays, it had the detune thing.
Right.
Instead of chorusing a lot of the time, you know. But I mean, and maybe because it was Mike's thing so much, I never pursued it. I actually had a friend of mine, this sax player, had one, and I saw it in his studio, one of the original ones with the lamp cord out of it.
Yeah.
And I brought it and tried to work it into my rig, and I didn't dig it, you know. But anyway, the Free the Tone pedal for like stepping on a stereo chorus that's really stereo and really has that. I have that, and then I have the Strymon Dig, D-I-G. Brilliant delay, love that.
Yeah.
Well, you know all about it because you got me that one too. And then I go into the Big Sky.
Yeah.
And so that's like a separate path, you know. It's like I'm gonna and I use the you know, a couple of these Synergy their Bassman modules really good. The deluxe one's really good. The Plexi is great. The 800 is fantastic. Into their power amp. I think Steve Fryette designed it.
Yeah, the Class D one.
Yeah, it's a one space that's 50 watts aside. The gigs I've done with that, I don't think I've ever been happier with my sound. Because before I was trying to use different multiple amp heads and stepping on a pedal to try and get all my distortion. You know, we talked about it a lot. It was like, okay, I got to get a good distortion sound into a clean amp.
Yeah.
Which, you know, some of your pedals do it. There's a couple I discovered along the way that do that, which, you know, there's a lot to be said for that when you have backline and you have a deluxe or something. You want to be able to get a fully realized crank sound.
Yeah.
But to me, it's so much cooler to actually switch to another module.
Yeah. I mean, you have real. I mean, I don't remember. I think that their tubes are running at, you know, real amp voltage. I'm pretty sure it was like 250 volts, or, you know, something like that on the 12AX7 preamps.
Yeah, and since you have like if I'm going from a clean thing on their Bassman or the deluxe module, and then you go to like a Plexi or a 800 thing, you can get have one of the you get the two things. You can have one set with, you know, some good rock grit, but not the full on lead thing, and then have the other. And so that's been really a nice thing. Done a bunch of these tours going to Asia with Nathan, and one thing I found what works great is you request. In my case, 2, because I was in stereo, 2 DeVilles.
You just go into the return of both of them, or what?
What's that?
You just go into the return of both of them for the power amp?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so great.
You get 2 power amp.
You can get them everywhere, and they got the power amp.
Yeah. Yeah,
and there's like
smart.
one spot. Of course, I'm too loud, right? So we end up turning my amps around.
Right.
And like when we go to this one place, like the Blue Note in Japan, they end up building like a whole fucking fort around my It's not like I'm blasting rock and roll the whole thing, but on a quiet stage, it's like. But I dig still going through the amp, and it's funny because I don't even have a desire to try a Kemper. They sound great, mostly for distortion. I still haven't heard the killer glassy clean thing where I just go, dude, that was the Kemper. Yeah. They're all like distorted sounds that I've heard, or that type of thing. Yeah. I've actually heard on the Axe Effect, I've heard a couple of Axe Effects, a couple of sort of clean things that were really nice where I actually this Italian Facebook friend of mine put a clip up and I'm like, damn, that's good. He had like a sustainy clean sound, and I'm like, dude, what do you use for that? And that was an Axe Effects. Nice. But I haven't personally tried them. And the Kemper thing, I don't have any desire to like. It sounds just like the tube amp, but it's digital. You know, why do I need that? I mean, I totally get the 12-pound thing that you throw in the backseat of your car and stuff. Totally get all that stuff. But I'm in my little, laboratory here, and I don't have to do that. I have a mic speaker cabinet, and I have my direct stuff. But I know I'm getting long-winded here, but in this quarantine shutdown thing, I rediscovered a piece of gear that I already had, this Fryette. It's called the Valvulator GPDI. And I got it a few years ago from him when I was actually out at his place to get his power amp, the mono power amp. Actually, when I got the Synergy, the first one, I had the mono Synergy thing. Okay. I bought it. And then the Synergy guys found out I was using it. I put a clip on Facebook, and someone was like, dude, what are you playing through? And I said, oh, it's this Synergy thing. And Prashant got in touch with me. Oh, okay, yeah. And so they got me the stereo one. That's when I expanded it to stereo. But anyway, so I lost my train. Oh, so when I was out at Steve's, I got the power amp, and then he showed me the GPDI, and it looked interesting and stuff. So I bought it, and did a few things with it at home, and it sounded good. But I think I was into like amps and the Synergy thing and stuff, and I never really delved too deeply into it. And so just breaking it out again, and it was up on my pile of gear that I have up on my wall, and I took it down at the beginning of this quarantine thing. Man, let me check this thing out. Man, it's brilliant. Brilliant. All these melodies I've been doing, they're on YouTube and on Facebook and stuff, have all been with that. And I experiment with different guitars, and like I was saying, like that compressor on some of those sustainy leads, it's on that and stuff. But I found it's really easy to tailor a sound. And I don't think I ever even tried to get the glassy clean sound out of it. Gets that great. You got to work with it a little bit, but that box for direct, it's like I would use that any day over any kind of Kemper or anything else because it's tube, it's voiced just great. I mean, I've messed around with a lot of direct kind of stuff, and like the Palmers and stuff like that. You're kind of stuck with the one sound, right? But the cool thing about the Fryette thing is that the way he's got the, I think it's called like, body and focus, or basically bass and treble. But the way that's voiced, you can really, depending on the guitar and the pickup and how fat you want it or how thin you want it and stuff, it's really usable. Yeah. And a good sounding, like really active treble, bass, and middle and stuff. Anyway, I'm plugging his thing just because it keeps blowing my mind that and the tunes I've worked on, that I'm working on in my studio for other people and stuff. I haven't even bothered putting any other amps up. Yeah, no, his stuff is great. In fact, I just put out a video. I don't know if you saw this one, the one where I was using the Helix in the wet, dry, wet system. No, I didn't see that
Yeah.
one. I saw it advertised. I didn't.
Yes.
Check it out.
So on that one, I use lately in here. I've been using this Paul Rivera concert from the 80's, a 60-watt
Really?
head, just the clean
Wow.
channel, and then I go out of that into the power load, which is the Fryette load box. And
how is that?
It's really good, and I have a lot of load boxes. I have that one, and I have the Boss Waza tube amp expander, and I have the aux box, and I have
Those three. I haven't tried the Ox or the Boss, but they look.
I'll bring them over when we do this H9 shootout. And I honestly, I'm pretty calibrated to a G1265, which is usually the speaker that I use in most of my Fender and Marshall amps that I have.
Right.
I can get really, really close to that. And I used the Kahayan speaker selector to go through the two of them, and usually in our studio I use a blue Encore 100i, which I think is one of the sleeper microphone for guitar stuff. It to me, it has a really good sort of balance of a 57 and a Royer.
Yeah,
and
I have that,
and they're cheap. They're like $100.
Yeah, I have that. It's good. I noticed it was really good for clean stuff.
Yeah, so I use two of them in two different positions typically, relative to the cone. And then I'll use that. And so anyway, I was comparing that to this, and I could get really, really close, and just the setup's easy. If I'm recording, video stuff at home, it's just easier for me to deal with it and sync it and not have to spend a lot of time with mic placement and stuff like that. And I've been really impressed with it. I thought it sounded the best, and it's fully analog, and all that stuff. So I've been really impressed. And I saw that he's coming out with another one that's the same thing, and then you can add in impulse responses to that, so you can do the adjustments, and then you can go into some additional sort of manipulation of the kind of the artifacts of the speakers and stuff like that.
Well, you have the best of both worlds with the miking thing, which I like about my scene here too, because you have your choice.
Yeah.
But I've noticed once your ear starts hearing the direct thing, it's very hard to go from that. You're better off starting with the speaker and staying with the speaker, because once your ear hears that direct, the speaker's never right there enough.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
But the valvulator thing is,
I'm gonna check it out.
It's really good for shaping a lot of different sounds. Whether you want a slightly overdriven telly kind of thing. I mean, I've found it really easy to dial in, and I sound like I'm an ad for it, but the weird thing was that I had it all those for maybe 4 or 5 years, man.
Have you seen these things, Michael? The Cab Zeus from GFI?
No.
Yeah, so this is basically they've generated maybe 20 different speakers in it and in mics, so you can. It has a left and a right in stereo, so you have to have your load still. But you can go into this, and so I was just trying it today, where I was using the load from the Fryette, and then using this to basically add in the impulse response essentially after it of the speaker.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I only messed with a couple, and I was only using it to receive the wet of the wet dry wet. And so, typically in the old days, would be, vintage 30s or something like that. That would be close mic with 57. So I just put the mic, really just close mic, took away any of the room sound, and then just to hear what it sounded like with vintage 30s and a 112 model. And it sounded fine for that. But I'm going to mess with it more tomorrow and see what it sounds like if I run the full wet, dry, wet. Because I have this one, and then I have a mono one that I'm going to be building some boards with and then doing some giveaways. But I was impressed just initially about if you actually wanted to do an ampless version of a wet, dry, wet, you could use that to do it.
Now, you say wet, dry, wet. I guess I was never really set up.
You sort of do it though, because your stuff is coming between the
Well,
speaker.
I would have a dry amp that was mic.
Yeah, but then and you were taking that mic and you were going into a mic pre that would then feed the rack.
Yeah, but it all came out of a mixer.
Right, and that's fine.
So I was mixing in my dry.
Yeah, so you were taking...
It's the same thing, I guess.
Yeah, except you just weren't going into cabinets. You were going into the mixer,
Right.
but that's the same thing. I mean, that's what I did with this. I was just taking this and going straight into the DAW.
Yeah.
I didn't have any
Yeah.
wet cabinets in the room, and I don't even have a wet cabinet I mean, I wasn't using a wet cabinet for my Rivera head. That was going into the Fryette, and then the line out of that was going line into the Apollo. So that was channel 1 on my mixer. And then and then I went through my lexicon and all that stuff. And then that was going in wet left, wet right on this guy. There's also a speaker through on it as well if I did want to go, or there's a through if I did want to go to a powered monitor, if I wanted to go to a power amp, but I wasn't doing that.
That's cool.
Just going straight in. And so you can manipulate it. So so you were doing it. and that's how I'm doing it on here on my rack when I'm not using this, is I have a mic pre that I've kind of modified so that I can run it has a tube, and it's sort of like a modified Chandler. So but I'm running the tube at 250 volts instead of, I don't know, some sort of, I don't remember what it was before, like 24 volts or something like that. So run it at a full 250, and then that feeds the lexicon delays and reverbs that are all 100% wet in parallel, and then that feeds. I have a Marshall valve state, the one that Landau used to use, the 8008 one rack space 50 watt a channel stereo power amp, and then that feeds the monitors. Or I can just go straight XL into the Apollo if I didn't want to.
Sounds like you've got it pretty covered. It's nice to be able to sit down and have all that at your fingertips.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's like right here by my side. It's like I can start messing with the concert, and you know, I should hook up the Kahayan thing so that I could switch between this and a few amps. But the reality is because it's all pedal centric. Having a high gain amp is not really, for enjoyment. It's great, but for demoing pedals, it's like it's not particularly an enticing way to showcase a high gain pedal through an amp that already has, you know, a bunch of gain.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing I noticed about mostly doing, you know, these working with that Fryette thing and doing these melodies and seeing what works best. Since I can get the distortion level out of the preamp that I want, and even with the Synergy before that, I've noticed I've gravitated to boosters a lot more, and haven't had that need for like the full-on distortion pedal, which I do. I remember like that one you made. I got like one of the best of my Europa sounds.
Oh yeah, the dynamic distortion, right?
The dynamic distortion, and I still have all those pedals, and I love not the rediscovering them, but like going in my closet and breaking out a pedal that I know was good to me, and loving that. But something about setting up my sound now, it's just boosters.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you know, those two exotic ones are great. The little you know, super sweet and stuff. But I got the Petty John, the super chime thing, or the chime 2 or something, which is just sort of a nice full bodied boost. Then I have this guy Seafoam Pedals, some guy in Alabama or something. Yeah. It's called the Lighthouse. Okay. Which also, I mean, there's a few different settings on it, but the one setting is just kind of a full. Yeah. It's funny how boosts, and you know better than anyone, all have their own little personality. I mean, I almost don't get it because it's like, it's like a couple of little transistors and chips and stuff, but the ones I have all have a different sound.
You should try putting your Vertex boost in the after the preamp.
After the preamp.
Yeah, because the ours can take internally. It's it'll take pretty much any swing. It'll do line level or whatever. I think it's plus or minus 9 rail to rail.
Which on the subject of that, I got to say that pedal has done me so well, and that's still been part of my live rig where I mean, the brilliant thing is being able to use. I mean, it's a great sounding clean booster as it is, but the expression pedal for your volume pedal is so cool. And I've turned a few people on to that.
Oh, yeah.
Like Mike O'Neill and a couple other people.
Yeah, and
they
Ricky,
just
you
thank
turn on
me.
Ricky
It's like,
to that. Ricky Z,
What's
Ricky
that?
Z, you brought him to the table on that.
Turn him onto it, and it makes such sense. And instead of trying to figure out how you're going to use this big metal volume pedal on your pedal board or off your pedal board and stuff, you have this little plastic. I mean, in the case of me, I have the Boss FV, whatever that is, And it's just, that has been a really cool thing. I think that's one of the innovations you have that I think someone's copying that now.
There's a couple. There's a couple that have done some similar stuff. I mean, it wasn't like it's there wasn't anything that was groundbreaking or anything like that. It was just that we were the first to do it.
The fact that you did it and you could use that, like that's your clean boost and your volume pedal, and that you can just have the boost on your pedal board and the volume pedal in your suitcase or whatever, you know.
It makes it convenient for sure.
No, that's worked so great, and I like being able to put instead of being stuck with the volume pedal on the pedal board, you can place the expression pedal wherever you want it, which is usually not, you don't want to be standing right by your pedal board the whole time.
How do you like those new A3 volume pedals? I saw that they made you like a custom one.
I like it a lot. Especially because my name is engraved on it.
Yeah, they give all the artists the special treatment.
Those guys gave the new one they gave me is really cool. Now, one thing that they have that I guess has been on other volume pedals, but not as successfully as this, is they have the booster, the clean booster, built into the volume pedal. But when you go to the tuner out, you don't lose anything. And it's so easy to try on an Ernie Ball or any one of those pedals. Have it without the tuner out and be listening, and then plug a jack in the tuner out. You hear a little dip in your volume every time.
Yeah, the parallel loading. Well, being active, they probably split the buffer to both sides.
Yeah, you got to have it on. But you know what? I have it on a little boost. And the boost is nice sounding. It's sort of a round... Just a nice round clean boost. I guess you can crank it up. I don't know what it goes up to, but I have it on just a little bit. But that that thing alone, because I was having to go from like a pedal that had 2 outs on it, like a chorus or different pedals, like for my live thing, to feed the tuner. Because I don't like to have to step on the tuner.
Right.
And I don't like I've done it where you put it on the headstock. That's goofy as hell. And another thing I found out is when you're on a stage playing with like a bass player and stuff, those things don't want to read.
Right, because they're picking up so many vibrations.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so to not have to have a pedal just to feed the tuner, it's pretty cool to have that built into... in fact, I was going to ask you, I guess there'd be a way to do that on the clean boost, right? Just another out.
Well, you could, if you weren't going to connect, so you could connect if you had a volume pedal that had a tuner out, like an Ernie Ball passive one. You could use the tuner out on that and it wouldn't make any difference because the impedance is isolated from the expression loop. So, like the boost only has a single expression out that's TRS.
Right.
So you could either use an insert cable, which is like a Y cable. So it's TRS on one side and then 2 monos. You could plug that into the input and output of your Ernie Ball, and you could run the tuner out of the Ernie Ball, and it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be an issue in terms of the impedance.
I see.
Or
but
the
like
loading.
with a Boss expression pedal, you couldn't do.
You couldn't do it because there's no tuner out on it. There's no parallel output. But anything that had a parallel, output off of the volume pedal would work. So FE 500 would work. The Ernie Ball would work. Any of the volume pedals that we typically think of would all work. Even the one that you have with the A3 one that would still work. You probably just wouldn't want to use the boost on top of the boost. But you could.
Although I've been known to boost on top of boost on top of boost. And then, recently I broke out this pedal, this diamond pedal.
Which one?
That's called the Boost EQ.
Oh, yeah.
Which was always part of my rig for a long time. they have a mid-range knob, and when you like at 12 o'clock, I think it's not affecting it. But if you dip it a little bit to the left, like for the clean Strat kind of sound, it rolls off. I mean, I never thought about it before, but it rolls off some mids in a really nice way. And then there's something about those diamond boosts that have like a thing to them, you know. So for years it was part of my thing, and then the switch went wonky, and I couldn't trust it, and so I put it up in my closet. And then I don't know, a couple of months ago I got it down again. I'm like, damn, this does sound good, and so I kind of leave it on all the time, so I'm not stepping on the switch. The switch isn't broken totally, but it does that.
We'll fix it when you come next time.
I need you, man. I need you. And the other pedal that's like that too is the Hartman flanger.
Oh no, those are so great.
Which I love, but like literally, you'll turn it on, no sound. You'll kick it, you get some sound.
All right, yeah, I fixed a lot of those. Unfortunately, like Theo is kind of like when he got out of the business, it was like a clean cut. And even though he still lives, I think he still lives in the area, because he's from Oakland. Like I remember being in a first year college student, and he had just started Hartman pedals out of his house. Like I went down into his basement, you know, and really? Yeah, I think at that time he only had
that flanger is good.
Oh, it's excellent. I mean, it's one of the closest electric mistresses you can get. There's another guy in Poland that you need to check out that has an exact copy of it that's smaller, and it's called the Roxanne flanger. And and the company is called Long Amp. Yeah.
Well, the Hartman works great. It's funny because like,
but he won't fix anything
about
anymore.
6 months ago, what's that?
But he won't fix anything anymore. It's part of like his deal is like his clean cut is that he's detached, you know, himself, and so and so I fixed a bunch of his stuff.
It's literally just the on-off switch.
Yeah, easy.
I can almost see it going. You know, you step on it, no sound. Step on it again, sound. You know, one of those things. It's like I don't know if it has to be cleaned or because it wasn't stepped on and off of like millions of times at all. You know.
Yeah.
But you know, I had to do a track of the song Barracuda for like Hart wanted to own it, so like they could use it for commercials and stuff.
Right.
So I took on the task of re-recording Barracuda, and I'm not in the business of doing sound-alikes usually, right? But it was kind of a challenge that I took. But I auditioned all my flangers, and and I read an interview with Roger Fisher where he said what he used on that record was this. It was like a kit. And I remember vaguely, like in the back of Guitar Player magazine, there was an ad. It was some company out of New York, like Systech or something like that, that you could like buy the kit to make this. It was like a rack flanger.
Yeah.
And when they were doing that tune, that was what he had, you know. And he said, all I remember was that it was on the slowest setting, right? So that helped me a really lot, you know. But I got my ADA out, which I still have, like the one from the 80's, and you know, an MXR. I have a few of them, and that won the vote, man. I mean, that came really. I had it like on the slowest, you know. Shit, I must have sat and played that intro for about an hour because I had to get it right with the drums. They have those individual tracks on YouTube. Yeah. So the engineer that put the session together for me got like Ann's vocal on a separate track and the drums on a separate track. It's a brilliant track when you hear the tracks by themselves.
I'll have to listen to it.
But like the intro, that figure starts out slower than the rest of the, you know, like the BPM that it goes to. And they obviously didn't cut to a click because it moves around. It's a very steady track, but it moves around. You notice it when you're recording it. So anyway, but the Hartman won the challenge big time.
Yeah, they're great, and I think that they're sort of been immortalized now. But yeah, if you ever want to try another one that's smaller, it's not tiny, but that Polish one, the Long Amp. Are really good.
Wow.
Yeah, they're cool. Yeah, that's cool that you got to re-record that, though. Did you use your Marshall amp on that or what?
No. Also, it was a really good. We just Googled it or something, but this interview with him was really good. He used a Strat, so I got like a Strat, a Fender Strat that I have that have. I think it has like the exotic single coil pickups in it or something.
Right.
But it was just perfect for the sound. And damn, I forgot. I used the Synergy thing.
Yeah.
I used like the 800 module.
Nice.
And and messed with it until, and then I Greg Leese. Is that no, not Greg Leese. The other guy.
It was what was his name? Howard Leese.
Howard Leese. He's on my Facebook. I should have known. He had a Telly with a Bigsby, right? So I have this Gretsch Sparkle Jet or something, the solid body one that has a Bigsby and so for the other side, so one side was the Strat, the other side was the Gretsch, and I nailed that sucker. I went through the tune. It was a piece of work getting all those parts and stuff, but it really, really sounds good. That was a brilliant track.
Yeah,
but
it was a brilliant track. Still withstood the test of time. That's still making heart money these days.
Yeah, so I don't know what they'll end up doing with it, but it was cool having those broken down tracks. Yeah. The isolated tracks.
Yeah.
Especially for Ann's voice. Yeah. I mean, the whole time I'm working on the tune, I'm hearing her lead vocal from.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if those tracks are in my hard drive of multi tracks.
Maybe they're right on YouTube.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I sent you a few of those multi tracks.
Guitars.
Did you listen?
What's that?
Did you listen to any of those multi tracks I sent you yesterday?
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Was that the part you played on the They Don't Really Care About Us, the Michael Jackson one?
Yes.
Okay.
And some, like the thing about Michael Jackson, talk about spare no expense. He spent so much money and he recut songs and he had like all these studios. I enjoyed it because I was getting triple scale and being flown to New York and my whole rig and stuff like that. But it was just like the days of just excess on the budgets, And this French guy wrote a Michael Jackson book and was trying to get like input from people who actually worked with Michael Jackson. And so he found me and he had a couple of the other guys that actually played on this stuff. But then he had like this engineer guy, this second engineer. It wasn't Bill Bottrell or anything. It was a guy that ended up working on a bunch of his things. And like this guy, he thinks he played on that They Don't Care About Us because at an earlier, like he was a guitar player. And I'm sure he was on an earlier version, but like right at the 11th hour, like after I had done Earth Song, I got home from New York and I walked in the door. Literally 15 minutes later, Michael Jackson's people called me and wondered whether I could fly back to New York right away with all my gear and to do that song, They Don't Care About Us, right? So as flattered as I was and stuff, I was hoping that didn't happen. Then it turned out, we can send the tapes out. And I ended up doing it with this guy, Michael Boddicker. And I spent 6 hours on that breakdown in the middle of that song. And we slowed the tape down to half speed because, I don't shred like that. Very few people do. It had to be clean and it was written out. Yeah. And it was a very, but at half speed, it was totally doable. So I had a rock sound up. And
was it like a JCM 800 or what was that?
4 bars at a time. Yeah, I was using, I've always kind of tended to have a Marshall, but it might have been the Egnator.
Oh, yeah.
That was the IE4. That was my thing. That into the power amp. It was probably that, in fact. But, so I spent all that time on that thing. And then they mixed the album, and I hear that break, and I can tell it's my guitars. And so I'm reading this Michael Jackson book, and this guy's going, and I was so glad that I made the cut, you know. And I mean, because he had done it months earlier or something, and not to take anything away from him.
And then on Earth Song, was that mostly acoustic? Because the track...
No, it's actually, until you sent me the isolated track, it's funny, it's like hearing your tracks. It's almost like hearing your baby crying. You know it's yours kind of thing. I had totally forgotten that I played acoustic guitar on that tune. I think that's the first thing you know, but I can tell that's my acoustic sound, unless I'm totally crazy. And then the thing you really hear on that are the, whatever those little, you know, whatever those little licks are.
Yeah.
The blues licks in the middle, and then on the out there's power chords, which you can hear pretty good. I actually that guy Pratt, he was the bass player on that. One of the first things I said is, "Who is that on bass?" Because he had that octave thing on his bass, and just an incredible bass sound. And he's been doing these COVID things on YouTube. Like tracks he played on.
Yeah, kind of like how Lee Sklar's
doing.
He
did a breakdown, and I commented on his thing that like the first thing I wanted to know was who was that bass player, and he was saying "Cheers, man" or whatever. But so there's power chords and there's stuff, you know, and that was fun.
What about the Change the World one that I sent you? Because you were doing were you doing the electric guitars in there?
Yeah, I mean the.
Because there's like
the big thing on that you hear is that chord. Oh.
What is like? It's like the F sharp.
Yeah, and then I don't think, I mean, that mix. It says instrumental mix, but I know I don't know what stage that was taken from.
Yeah, neither do I.
Because there's some other things that you weren't hearing on there.
Yeah, well, there's another track I didn't send you, which is like a scratch vocal of Clapton doing like a scratch vocal, and you can hear him like, I don't know if he was still smoking cigarettes at that point, but you can hear him like sound like he's taking a drag and then coughing and then like cutting back in like partway through the singing take.
Wow.
I mean, that's what it sounded like.
The thing about that tune was there was a really good demo that
because Babyface wrote that one, right? Not Clapton.
What's his name? Gordon Kennedy, and Tommy Sims, Nashville songwriter, great players. Tommy Sims is phenomenal. So this demo, I remember coming into the studio and hearing their demo, which is what we were copying, you know. And usually Babyface would, you know, he'd come up with his own arrangement or something, but it was like, this thing is so great. Their demo sounded like a really cool record, you know. That was another one of those songs. It's just like you heard it the first time and you go, this is different. You know, this is cool. And so when I played on the track, Dean Parks had come in the night before because Kenny hadn't learned it yet. And he, you know, he played it and he played it correctly and he played it right and stuff. But I believe Kenny ended up redoing it. And that track you sent me sounds like him on acoustic. But I remember I even did a wacky thing, like I had my dobro, and I didn't do it slide, but I played like a picked, like a some kind of part like that was, you could barely hear it, but it was on the record. Kenny's on guitar, Clapton's on, you know, a couple of guitars. And then I got to play it, you know, like on that thing with Clapton, and ended up playing that song so much. It was one of those things where like I wanted to go back and redo my guitar because it was like,
were you there?
You know, it's that thing of coming into a session and hearing a song, and like, you know, the guys that had careers doing it were very good at coming up with parts, and you sort of go with your first instincts, you know. That song has some trickier changes, so it was kind of like, it's not just, you don't just close your eyes and play a part. You know, you had to kind of feel your way around and stuff. But I was happy when the record came out that one chord,
made it.
You could hear it.
Yeah, it is a little tricky though. That half diminished is what I noticed. Like when I was playing in like wedding bands and stuff like that, people would screw up that half diminished part.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that.
Yeah.
It's tricky. I mean, we rehearsed it all those days, and every day I'd realize that I didn't know another. I would add something else that I thought I knew on the song, and I didn't. Yeah, that was one of those songs.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's definitely withstood the test of time. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it broke with that John Travolta movie, where he was like a clairvoyant or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was a big song.
Yeah.
Big song for sure.
Yeah.
Man, I told you I was going to try and make this short.
Yeah, here we are 2 hours later, but that was amazing.
Oh, my God. I guess you got to do a part 1 and a part 2 or something.
No, I think it's, this format. I mean, we had a pretty steady viewership throughout, in terms of the numbers. So I think that people are interested. They want to hear about it. And I'm just really grateful that you were willing to spend this much time and kind of dissect the tones and the approach. And,
total pleasure.
Yeah, man.
You get me going, and then you can't shut me up.
Well, on my to-do list, I will have to get you a Nile compressor tomorrow, and so you'll have it. It'll just be shipping from the warehouse in Van Nuys, so it'll probably be there on Monday.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, man, Michael, that was incredible. I really appreciate all your time and yeah, just giving us everything, the behind the curtain view and
Yeah. Well, I hope that if some of your viewers find it interesting. I always loved any info I could get on that kind of stuff, and there was too little of it back when I was coming up. But
yeah, there definitely is. I think that somebody needs to make a replica of the Hitmaker Strat.
I think, Tarek, Tarek.
Yeah.
He had Tyler build one, and to every spec he could try to copy on that thing. And we A/B'd it back when, and it was really close. I mean, it had the preamp, it had the Fralins, it had the Alder, it had the maple neck. Wasn't quite the same, and that's what showed me that, like, wow, this particular guitar has a little bit of mojo.
Yeah, well, I think every good guitar sort of has that, and even if you play 50 of the exact same model guitar, like when this Rory Gallagher Strat, I played like 12 of them.
Really?
Because I had gone to Sweetwater and then Chicago Music Exchange like back to back, so I did like a clinic thing or with all the salesmen at Chicago Music Exchange, and then I had gone to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to do training at Sweetwater and videos and stuff like that. And then I was flying back out of Chicago, so I played this guitar in Chicago, and then I went to Fort Wayne, Indiana. They had like 12 Roy Gallagher Strats at Sweetwater, so I played those. And there was like one, I wrote down the serial number, the best one, and then I went back to Chicago Music Exchange to play this one again because I was like, I think I went to Chicago Music Exchange was better. This one was the best one,
really?
Yeah. And even though they're all the same guitar, like this one just had more mojo than the other ones. Whatever it was.
Well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's why it's always been a real sort of, not risky thing, but like when you can't just take it down off the wall and try it then and there and you're ordering it custom, it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Even though with a good builder, it's going to be a good guitar probably, but...
Well, I know James
Tyler, block of wood.
Tyler is like that, though. I mean, I've heard stories about how he just will burn, like, just garbage cans full of wood that didn't meet. Like, he'll build a guitar and it's not right, and then he'll just throw it away. Really? So I've heard. I haven't witnessed it, but I've heard that he's very discerning about that. But I'll tell you, the ones that I've been really impressed by, I've, of course, played some of his guitars, and they're great, but the Japanese versions are, like, incredible deals for what they are. Really? They're like half the price of a normal Tyler guitar and like all the fit and finish. Wow. So if I end up getting another Super Strat, I think it might be one of those Japanese Tylers.
Yeah. I mean, with the stuff that's out now, I was telling you about these Fluence pickups. There's a lot of really good stuff now where you can put together the things you like, the ingredients,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was really cool. I'm so glad that we got to go through all this stuff. And I mean, I think.
Well, we always talk about it at Gilbert's anyway.
Yeah.
This is just like 3 Gilberts in a row.
Yeah. Well, next time maybe we'll have to do an abbreviated version. I'll have a hazmat suit and we can.
I know.
We'll puree the Gilberts.
This is our version of Gilbert's now, minus the Mexican.
Yeah, we'll
food.
puree the Gilberts and we'll each have our straws.
Yeah. Right.
Cheese enchilada milkshake. Well, Michael, I am so grateful again, and thank you. And I look forward to speaking with you soon, and I'll catch up with you offline on getting you the compressor and all that stuff.
Fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you, man. I enjoyed it.
All right. Good night. So that was Michael Thompson, and we went overtime on this one. We were almost at 3 hours. He had so many stories and just such a great storyteller. I'm mesmerized by him. I think he did an incredible job of telling us all the secrets, taking us through all the classic sessions, taking us through some really, really big songs and big hits. That was really amazing. I think that this is sort of like a once-in-a-lifetime sort of opportunity to hear some of these stories. So I'm really glad that he talked about this here. I want to thank everybody who is behind the scenes today that you're not hearing, but they're making this totally possible. That's none other than Hunter Harrison, who's mixing and editing this podcast, Mason Mejia, who's co-producing, and Tim Marco, who is making all of the music. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. See ya.